Hi everyone, it's Erin with Hail Varsity. I'm joined by Greg, recruiting extraordinaire, also of Hail Varsity, and it is a big week for Greg. It is a big week for anyone who is a recruiting fan. The early signing period kicks off on Wednesday. Greg, how are you doing?
I am well. I am busy, but I am very well. This is an exciting time. I love this time of year, even though it's basically all I can focus on now. I'm excited.
Yeah, and the one thing that people are really interested about, which leads really nicely into this week's question, is with the early signing period. This is oftentimes the big majority of the classes. Majority of it is signed at this point for most schools, but things are going to be a little different for Nebraska this year. So this came from Husker Cat 1 on Twitter. They want to know, how big will Nebraska's class be, the 2022 recruiting class? And that includes transfers. Greg, going into Wednesday, knowing that this is going to look a little bit different, we've talked about this in a number of videos previously. If people want to go check those out, please do. What are you thinking the size of this class is going to look like?
Yeah, it's a great question in a way because it has been a moving target throughout the season. For the most part, it's funny. Normally, it starts off and everybody thinks, okay, 25 is generally the starting point. That was kind of the starting point for about a month. Then it became, well, it's going to be very small in large part because no one knew kind of what the COVID eligibility freeze would do again for this year, whether or not the NCAA, remember, whether or not the NCAA would even kind of change the rules around that or what they would do. They did not really change the rules, and the rule is that if you are a person that can return to school this coming season, your scholarship does count against the school that you're returning to. Essentially, you're a counter, unlike the previous season where guys like Ben Stilley did not count scholarship-wise for Nebraska. Therefore, there was no impact on the numbers of players that you could take in the recruiting class. With this signing class, those numbers do count. So for Nebraska, it shrinks that number. You still don't know 100% how many of these guys are coming back. I assume that Nebraska, internally, has a little bit of a better example or of a better feel and handle of that. But the number that we've all kind of been operating with is about 13 to 15 or 16, if you want to push it. Then more attrition started to happen throughout the season, and you saw players move on, like Savion Morrison and others that still had multiple years of eligibility left. So that kind of pushed that number up. But there was a plot twist in that. Scott Frost came out and said, hey, we need to basically focus on transfer players and JUCO players to be able to help us win immediately in 2022. So those numbers have to be factored into that as well, but they don't factor in necessarily for the 2022 recruiting class. I still think that Nebraska is looking at probably 14 high school signees in this recruiting class, and then 7 to 10 junior college / transfer players also added to the team.
It's going to be interesting to sort of watch how people react to this class as well, because in addition to the fact that it is going to be a smaller class, which, is not a shock, that has kind of been what it was going to be all along. Like you said, everything with the COVID year really threw a wrench into things. I think the one thing that will be interesting to watch perspectives sort of form, and obviously we'll get your input and we'll be able to talk about it a little bit in these videos and beyond, is, the fact that not only is this a small recruiting class, but Nebraska is also looking at being ranked pretty low with this recruiting class. And I know for a lot of people, there's a belief of, star ratings, rankings, everything only means so much, which is true, but they do mean something. And so I think, there's going to be a lot of commentary for people to look forward to when it comes to what this class actually means, what it looks like, what it's capable of. Because I think, Greg, the one thing I've taken from you and some of the things I've read from you to date is it doesn't seem like a lot of the incoming freshmen are going to be immediate contributors out of this class. It really seems like the immediate contributors, as we figure, obviously, will be your transfers. Everything that they've been saying, that they have been told, that has been communicated to you, is that they want them to come in and be immediate impact players, like you said. So that's also going to make this a really interesting class where it really doesn't feel like a lot of those incoming freshmen, even if they enroll early, will see a lot of playing time, at least in their at least in their first year. They're not going to see a lot of playing time potentially in their first year because of the fact that they've really focused on those transfers to try to make quick, immediate impacts.
Yeah, that's going to make like this week and the actual signing day kind of jarring, I think, for a lot of fans, because there are a lot of people that tune in to recruiting coverage when we get around this time, right? There are a lot of people that they love to figure out once the guys get here and try and figure it out, and this is about that time that they really dial into it, and they'll look and see, well, Nebraska is ranked where last in the Big Ten, like they're in the 60s about nationally. And there will be a little bit of panic, I think, that sets in with that. In addition to, I'll reiterate it, you said it, is that I don't think that very many of the players in the class are going to contribute, that from the high school class, are going to be contributing to the team right away. And that's always for a number of reasons. One, I think that there are more, I guess, quote unquote, developmental players in this class. But then also, that's not something that at this point Scott Frost and his staff can rely on to really help the team win in 2022 anyway. I think it is a smarter tack to take to say, hey, transfers and JUCO guys are going to be the ones that help push us over the top. And so I think that will make for a really interesting day on Wednesday.
And, this is really a make or break situation for Frost when you think about the fact that, we did know that and to be clear, the recruiting class was did not suddenly become a smaller class because of the change in staff. When he made that
Right.
decision to fire 4 people and replace them, that was not something that changed that number. It did make things more complicated because it's really hard to go into a recruit's home without an offensive coordinator, without sort of an offensive game plan. And even now, they don't know. I know you have things live right now on hailvarsity.com where the recruits are saying, I don't know what the plan is with Ron Brown. I don't know
Right.
kind of what's happening in that spot. And, having the offensive coordinator piece is key. That does help because at least until they have that position announced, who's going to fill that open spot, you at least have some perspective over what to kind of expect. But it is going to make things a little bit, it has always going to make, this class was always going to be small. The change in staff has definitely contributed to the fact that for Nebraska, the early signing period is probably going to feel underwhelming. The traditional signing day in February actually might be a bigger deal for Nebraska, but also for people who are wondering, hey, what does it mean for transfers? They don't sign like that's not going to look the same. So if you're going, where's this person? In the case of some years, they may just show up on campus, and that is how we
Right.
find out. So, and I mean, we'll know before, but I'm saying like, there's not the like big ceremonial, the fax just came in, like that
Right.
kind of stuff. So it's going to be a little bit of like, I think the word jarring is probably correct. I like that word in this. It's going to feel a
Very
little
different.
different. Yeah. So if you're a Nebraska recruiting fan, or you're, like Greg said, you're just starting to tune in this week because this is like the primary week, definitely bookmark hailvarsity.com. Like, just a
Yep.
little plug right there. Greg has the recruiting notebook, which goes live Sunday through Thursday, 6 p.m. Central. He always dives into this topic more in depth on Mondays. So again, 6 p.m. Central at hailvarsity.com. But he will also have plenty more on what you need to know about this class, things to keep an eye on going forward, what you need to know about those transfers, those coming from junior colleges, those who are graduate transfers, you name it. There's going to be a lot to sort of dissect here, and it's not going to be the traditional, most of your class is signed on Wednesday, get this thing, put a bow on it, call it a day. This is going to be, it's going to be a little bit more of a long haul for Nebraska.
Yes, 100%. Because even in cases, and everybody always wants to talk quarterback, right? Even in the case of whoever Nebraska is going to bring in for transfer quarterback, that's not going to be settled this week, right? Like, we're going to continue to see that play out. And that can happen for any number of positions that Nebraska is continuing to recruit, even guys that have already been on campus during this contact period for official visits. They could continue to push their decisions out through January. You just never know. Like, I think it's going to be a rolling thing, this recruiting class.
It also makes things interesting that so much change has happened in college football along the
Right.
way, that you've had change at Oklahoma. You've had change now at USC because of Oklahoma. They're the domino effects of like decisions of one coach leaving to go somewhere else does make things more interesting. So like Greg said, you might see players end up deciding to declare. I mean, you could still, I guess, see somebody declare for the draft, but decide to go into the transfer portal or make a decision later because there's so much really out there. I mean, I think some of this is even going to go into spring where we're going to be finding players who maybe stick around to see what a situation looks like at their school with whomever is new. And then things change and they decide this isn't right. So like, this is going to feel like a bit of a long haul. I don't say that to make Nebraska fans. If you feel critical of where the recruiting class stands right now, that is totally fair. I'm not saying that to remove that criticism. I think questioning why this class has sort of been such a slow moving project is a totally fair thing.
Very valid. Yeah.
It's a very valid thing. So I don't say that of like, well, just wait. I just mean at this point where Nebraska is at with this recruiting class, it is going to be a little bit of, I'd say shaping the 2022 roster is probably even more fair than just saying the recruiting class. It's really truly shaping the roster. I think it's going to be a bit of an interesting next six months or so.
Yes, absolutely. And a really critical 6 months or so, because one of the things that has struck me about talking to some of the guys, recruits that have been on campus so far over the last couple of weeks, is that Scott Frost has been pretty upfront about it being a make or break year and a year that they need to win a lot more. And so that adds another layer of urgency to all of this, which is why the reshaping the roster way of thinking this, I think, is the exact right way to go about it.
Well, Husker Cat 1, we appreciate your question. You not only got it answered, but you got plenty more with it. So we appreciate that. For everyone who chimes in every week, we do appreciate that. Continue to ask questions, have a conversation here on YouTube. You can also tweet at Greg Smith HV, or at Hail Varsity if you have questions, if you want to further this conversation. Be sure to head to the Recruiting Notebook tonight, 6 p.m. Central, at hailvarsity.com. And while you're there, go ahead and either like give somebody a gift subscription, subscribe for yourself. Like there's no reason not to be a Hail Varsity subscriber. We would really certainly love to have you. So yeah, Greg, any final thoughts before we let you go?
It's going to be a fun ride this week and beyond.
It's going to be a big week. So everyone, thank you as always. Keep having the conversation. We'll be back next week. We'll be back sooner than that. But for the recruiting question of the week, we'll be back next Monday. Thank you as always. We'll talk to you later.